Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Ted, hanging out with
Dave.
And today we're gonna, get back to what does your class say about you, and we're gonna talk Warlock.
But before we make any packs, go down to the description where you can find Nerdarchy, the newsletter, and you can make a pact with us to get weekly gaming tips and even game with Nerdarchy.
So the Warlock, it's 5th edition's favored class. It's got a lot of options, but when you roll up at the table and say I'm a Warlock, what does it say about you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, a lot of times the class that you play and the choices you make within that class will really start to define that character's personality. Now, the funny thing about the Warlock is it's not like you didn't train to be a Warlock. You didn't study magic. You weren't born a certain way. It's most similar to the cleric, yet different.
Right.
The Warlock represents a covenant between you and a powerful being.
Right.
And that could come about because you sought it out. That could come about because, in a dire situation, you called out for help, and this is the thing that answered you.
Perhaps there's something special about you, and the power sought you out.
True. Like, what if you were born under a certain circumstances?
Right.
If you look at the Dresden Files, Harry Dresden, in a lot of ways, has had Warlock packs throughout his career, and they talk about well, this might be a spoiler, it might not be, I don't know. There's a bunch of books out, but they talk about how he was born under a certain configuration of stars, and that's why he's one of the reasons why he's special. Now, they don't say that's why that the Fae have saw him out or answered him, but it could very well be a possibility.
Right.
So a Warlock, I don't think where other classes, because like a wizard, a rogue, a fighter, all those classes, even a ranger, they have to spend so much time training and actively seeking to become that thing. It really does begin to define who they are. Right.
Now, one of the things that I think it bears mentioning is, in game terms, your class says what you are, but once you actually get to the role playing, who walks around oh yes, I'm a Warlock, well,
that's exactly it.
So
a fighter, that class more so defines your profession. You're a soldier, or you're a warrior,
mercenary.
You're a mercenary. You've trained for that. But you're right. Like other classes, like a sorcerer or a warlock, by some other means, you've taken on this power. So no, you don't. You're not going to define yourself as that thing.
Right.
It's just a part of you. It could literally be, it could be this thing that's hovering over you that you always have to answer to. But you're right. You're not going to roll up in the town and you're in the tavern and you're sitting there with Bob the fighter. Yeah.
So what do you do? Oh,
I serve the Dark Lord.
Yeah, you're not going to be like, oh well, you see, I really crave power, and I sold my soul to a demon so that I can burn my enemies before me. It's not how you're gonna introduce yourself unless you're angling for the villain slot in the town.
Unless you're super goth.
So realistically, are you gonna walk around saying you're a mage, you're a sorcerer? Are you gonna define yourself as what your background is? Oh well, I'm a noble, and I've got these abilities, or I'm.
Well, you might not talk about the abilities at all. You might just talk about, what makes you a noble. What does your family do? You may, or maybe you're a guild artisan, and well, I'm a blacksmith. Well, it's kind of odd. You're not blacksmithing. You're here. So there's definitely things like that. Or you might have to find something completely else to kind of define your character. Does he have a lifelong goal or ambition? And that's why he's accepted this covenant with this otherworldly being.
Right.
Well, yeah, I guess it would probably be an otherworldly being.
Yeah, because it's usually Fae, a celestial, a fiend. You know, so it's not something that's natural to hear. You know, if you get into, you know, some alternative ideas,
like a dragon.
you know, you could do, you know, a dragon as definitely something that's powerful enough if it's something that's, you know, been around the block for a while.
But now, like, as your warlock levels, right? You get to pick your boon, right? So, where I feel like no matter what your patron is, that doesn't actually have to really influence your character's personality per se, because that could be the thing that when you reached back, or whatever, like that could have absolutely nothing to do with what kind of person your character is.
Right.
But I do believe his pack boon absolutely defines what kind of a person he is.
Right.
You know, Pack of the Chains, you've literally used your covenant with this otherworldly being to basically
enslave another creature.
Yes.
You know, you're getting, some, typically it's imps, but, you know, you could technically
an imp, closet, sprite, or a cat.
Right. You know, like, you could get something else, and, you know, there's nothing to say that you couldn't take that same set of stats and create something that fits more with what you're serving. You know, but those things. Okay, well, you're taking Pact of the Chains, Pact of the Blade, Pact of the Tome. Each of those things define you. Are you getting a servant? Are you getting access to spells? Are you being a more martial character?
Well, yeah, like, because like the Book of Shadow might, it could either be, you're just a more cerebral character, or that's how you want to exude and exhibit the power from your patron, in that very, in a more of a magical, eldritch, arcane way. Or like you said, the Pack of the Blade, well, that really makes you more of a martial character. Mm-hmm. And more prone to in your face physical violence than casting spells or operating through a servitor.
Right.
So that character might be more aggressive, more confident, and just more physical than the other versions.
Right.
Or you could go the same way too. I feel like with the chains a little bit too. Like, you could be like a domineering person, a bully. Yeah. And that's why you choose it.
If you went back,
or a manipulator.
Right. If you went back to the Tome, you as you said, you could be more cerebral. You care more about the mental stats, and you use this bargain to gather and possibly share knowledge that you're attempting to prevent something from happening, and you're willing to give of yourself so that those around you will profit.
Yeah, like another, like, a lot of times, and it's become pretty trite at this point, is I'm a warlock because I was going to die and something offered me a chance to live, right? Like, over and over again. Like, so I really want to do a warlock and do something different, because I've seen that enough times. I've done it. It's time for something new. Mm-hmm. What about the warlock that sees himself as actually sacrificing of himself in order to help the greater good?
The warlock that I played in Scott's game that we didn't play here, I took a whole new spin on warlock. I said, rather than me having made a bargain, I stole power. It was a higher level game, so I took warlock as a multi-class later on to complement my sorcerer's powers, and I found a book that talked about this greater power. And while everyone was in my adventuring party was resting for the evening, I wound up just reading this book, and I couldn't put it down. I couldn't draw my eyes away from it. Well, by the time I finished reading, I didn't remember a single thing that I read, but I wound up creating this bond between me and this sleeping power that's out in the cosmos. And like, I was siphoning power from him, so my warlock levels were literally stolen, and I put it out there, for the DM to use. It's like, all right, there's this, power that's out there. He's got agents, whatever you want to do with it, but here's an enemy for you. And if he comes after me and I die, so be it. But rather than me making a bargain.
Or you might just show up and be like, "Oh, by the way, you work for me." But
yes,
you read the book. That's like signing on the dotted line.
So I stole power, and I got to go through this whole thing, and it was interesting rather than it.
I just see this little disclaimer at the end of the book. Therefore, by here, reading this book and completing this line, you agree to the aforementioned blah blah blah.
Yes,
all legalese. And mine went.
and that's kind of what it is. It's like so. It's a cool role playing thing. It's the other way around. I'm stealing it. I'm taking it. And it's up to them to decide whether the DM is gonna go along with it, whether he's gonna just leave it out there floating. So it was cool.
Yeah. So like the more interesting concept or way of going about your Warlock pact will influence heavily what kind of character that you've created. Whether it's the lifeboat character that did it to save their life, and does that mean they're willing to do anything to preserve themselves?
Right.
What does it really say about them? Or the character that unwittingly enters into this bargain, or is it because they're knave and that's a big a stumbling block or flaw for that character that you get to role play throughout it? Is it the self-sacrificing character that goes, yes, I'm, really, if you look at the original Ghost Rider character, he was trying to save someone he loved, so he made a bargain with the demon.
Right.
It could literally be something like that. You make this bad choice out of love, not necessarily desperation,
mm-hmm.
and then you have to deal with the consequences. Like how is that going to affect your character throughout his adventuring career? He's kind of going to be harrowed by this decision throughout his whole life.
And depending upon what type of pact you make with both role playing and and game terms, it's gonna affect your character, and I think it should affect the story. Your warlock for Scott's other game, you made a pact with a demon, and you wanted to go into hell and get your soul back, and you actually did.
And I did. And as a player, I didn't really ever want to do that because I didn't want to lose my warlock powers. And and Scott being the DM that he is, he did this weird thing, and he's and most of his narration, a couple die rolls, and this one thing occurred. He's I went to hell with a group of people, and one of them, a couple of them were paladins, and one was a 4th level paladin, and he's you can absolutely succeed with that die roll if you allow that paladin to die. And it's I will absolutely allow that paladin to die. And and so he's you have this little cage with a glowing ball in it, and it's your soul.
Right.
And he's you have the option of reabsorbing your soul into yourself or just keeping it in the cage, therefore keeping your warlock power, which was interesting and cool. But but again, so again, that was a very trite way of portraying the warlock pack. I believe that was my first one that I played a warlock with, but my decision with that was, well, even though he has to serve this power and he's gaining power from it, he will always want to get his soul back, and that's his objective and his goal. So I allowed that to help define that character.
Right.
So you guys, in the comments below, let us know how being a warlock has defined your characters in the games that you're playing. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can follow us on Twitter at Nerdarchy.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.
The thing about the warlock is, it's not you didn't train to be a warlock. You didn't study magic. You weren't born a certain way. It's most similar to the cleric, yet different.
Right. Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Ted, hanging out with
Dave.
And today we're gonna, get back to what does your class say about you, and we're gonna talk Warlock.
The Warlock represents a covenant between you and a powerful being.
Right.
And that could come about because you sought it out. That could come about because, you know, in a dire situation, you called out for help, and this is the thing that. But before we make any packs, go down to the description where you can find Nerdarchy, the newsletter, and you can make a pact with us to get weekly gaming tips and even game with Nerdarchy.
So the Warlock, it's, you know, 5th edition's you know, favored class. It's got a lot of options, but when you roll up at the table and say I'm a Warlock, what does it say about you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, you know, a lot of times the class that you play and the choices you make within that class will really start to define that character's personality. Now, the funny